Hi there, good to be with you again and working our way through John's Gospel in chapter 6 at the minute. Just give a little bit of context for the verses we're going to read today. Jesus has just fed the 5,000 where these crowds have gathered to him, and he's multiplied in this boy's lunch, provision for everyone, demonstrating something of who he is. There's more than enough in Christ for everyone. In chapter 6 verse 14, the crowd's reaction is that this is truly the prophet. And what they're referring to there is Moses in the Old Testament, where it said that one like Moses would come again, another prophet, someone to speak into, to represent God to the nation and lead them. But Jesus withdraws, he goes away from the crowd, he doesn't want to be pressed into their agenda for him, and he crosses the sea, but the crowds follow. They're coming after Jesus because they've had their fill of food, curious maybe how he got across, and we're going to pick it up in verse 30. Read a couple of verses there. So they said to Jesus, "What then do you do for a sign that we may see and believe you?" What they're referring to there is what Jesus said prior to this, that the work of God is to believe in the one that he sent, referring to himself. So they're like, "Give us a sign. Why should we believe you?" And they say in verse 31, "Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written. He gave them bread out of heaven to eat." This is referring back to Exodus chapter 16, story of Moses in the wilderness as the people of God are led out of slavery. Before they get to the promised land, they're 40 years in the wilderness. And God's provision of this manna, this bread-like substance to sustain the people on their journey. And the people are like, look, Moses did this incredible miracle for thousands and thousands of people over 40 years. Jesus, you kind of provided lunch in an afternoon for 5,000 people. Maybe not quite so impressive as Moses. Give us something even more impressive. Give us a greater sign even than these things. That will help us believe you. But once again, Jesus doesn't dance to their tune. He teaches truth about himself. And he says in verse 32, "Truly, truly, I say to you," listen up to what I'm saying, Jesus is saying, "it is not Moses who has given you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world." Then they said to him, "Lord, always give us this bread." And Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst." So once again, Jesus, when he's asked a question, he's not pointing outside of himself. He's saying the truth about God is located in me, in who I am. And they're huge claims to make, that he is the source of life. It says, my Father gives this bread out of heaven. It comes down out of heaven. Sort of echoes of John 3:16, "For God so loved the world, he gave his only son." And Jesus says this bread gives life, that he's claimed to be the source of life to the world. Verse 35, more explicit, "I am the bread of life." Again, echoes of Exodus here with the "I am" deal. This is the first of 7 "I ams" in John's Gospel. And in Exodus, when Moses asks God, "Who shall I say you are?" God's reply, "I am who I am." And here Jesus is putting himself once again in the shoes of God, that I am the bread of life. I'm the one who sustains you. I'm equal with God. I don't just deliver the food. He's not like a Deliveroo driver who drops off the food for someone else. Jesus is the food himself. He is the bread of life. So many other religious figures and philosophical kind of leaders would point to truth out there, but not located within their very person. And yet Jesus absolutely does that right through the Gospels. He's pointing to himself, and he's saying this equality with God, therefore, is the end of your searching as well. Verse 35, we just read out, "The one who comes to me will not hunger, and the one who believes in me will never thirst." Think about that. That's a huge claim again to make. You come to me, you'll never hunger. You'll not thirst anymore. What's he saying? He's saying he's enough there for our biggest questions about life, about God, our deepest needs, the hungers that we have to know that we are loved, to know that we are accepted, to know that our for meaning, for purpose are found in God, that he's enough for our greatest failures, where we've royally messed up and sinned. Then Jesus is enough for those things. We don't hunger again for forgiveness. We don't thirst again for love, because God said promises that he gives these things ultimately in Christ. And I was out running the other morning, and I looked up at this massive concrete wall, and on the wall had some plants growing out of it. Well, they shouldn't really be growing. And I just thought to myself that, growth happens, life happens in the most unexpected places, but also some of the most difficult places. If the conditions are right, if there's food and water and light. And this season we've been going through, not been easy. I keep saying that, COVID lays like a blanket of complexity over every area of life. It affects everything we do. And we go through difficult things as it is, let alone with dealing with COVID as well. And yet God promises to be with us in that, and he promises actually that he can bring growth and fruitfulness in our life through that, if we believe in Christ, if we put our trust in him. And it requires, like I said, food, water, light, and Jesus makes the claim to all of those through John's gospel. And the scope of Jesus' claim as well is massive. He says to the whole world. That's more than Moses in sort of a locality for a limited period of time to a specific people group. That was the boundaries of what Moses did there with the manna, or what God did with the manna rather, through Moses. Whereas Jesus' claim is to all people, all times, in all places. But it's not just a kind of generic kind of thing for the world, what God does in Christ and who he is. It's for each one of us. And Jesus makes the sort of general world specific in verse 37, where he says, the one who comes to me, I will not cast away. The one. And again, that's a theme through the Gospels, where Jesus goes after the one. And he makes it personal to each one of us, to you and to me, that he is the bread of life. And that he can satisfy our hunger. And he can deal with our deepest needs and our greatest thirsts, as it were, as well. And in verse 34, he says, please, they say to Jesus, please give us this bread. What a great prayer to pray. Sometimes if you don't know how to pray or what to pray, get into the Bible, get into the Gospels. Look how Jesus prayed. Look how people responded to Jesus. And here we've got this great prayer that kind of, again, echoes the Lord's Prayer. Give us today our daily bread. Please give us this bread. Give us what we need for today. God's promises that he will. He'll give us the strength we need, the grace we need, the wisdom we need, the help we need, the forgiveness we need today. And maybe let's make that our prayer today. Good to be with you. Hope it's been helpful. Take care.